Hi everybody, it's Harvey here from the Growthproperties Group. I'm just going to do a quick video on finding your ideal tenant and more importantly matching them to the correct property. So it's all well and good, you might have a great tenant, but if you put them in the wrong property, like in the wrong area that don't suit them, or if you've got a house of multiple occupancy and for instance you've got some social housing people in there and you put somebody retired in there, it might not be a match. Or you put students in with somebody retired, it's not a match. So firstly, you want to find the correct tenant, but you want to make sure you're putting them in the correct area. You have to be careful not to discriminate. You're not allowed to discriminate, but ultimately you want to guide them on whether or not it's the right match for them, because if it's not the right match, what will happen is they'll move on quickly and you'll have a short-term tenant, which is not ideal. Well, not for what I want. I want long-term tenants that it's not got a lot of turnover. It saves money, time and work. So there's some tips on finding your great tenant or your ideal tenant and a good tenant. They're not foolproof, and also don't forget, when somebody wants something, they always put on a good impression. So sometimes somebody looks great and then as soon as they move in, all of a sudden they change. So it's not foolproof, but there's some guides towards it. But always remember as well is a good tenant sometimes can also turn bad for your circumstances, like a life bereavement, like bereavements in the family, a loss of job, a split up of a relationship. Things can always turn somebody good into somebody bad. So always remember, in property, be aware of, if you're in property long enough, but the chances is you'll be very lucky if you didn't come across having a bad tenant at one point. But if you follow some of these guides, this will put the odds a lot more firmly in your favour. So firstly, when you're doing the interview stage, first impressions count. First impressions are massive. They say you've got 3 seconds to make a first impression, but you want to make a first impression both ways. So you want the first impression from them, but also the person doing the viewing, if you're doing it yourself or if an agent's doing it, you want to make sure that first impression is good. The first impression of the property is good. So when they walk up, it's clean, tidy, no mail on the doorstep. The house has been a professional clean, the garden's tidy. So that first impression is really important, and the first impression you give to them or the person who's doing the viewing gives to them. Next is trust your instinct. It's a massive one. Trust your gut. Quite often you'll get a feeling for them as soon as they come in. Not foolproof, but you should be able to trust your gut. The next is you want to be doing thorough references. At the start, I've done a bit of training with a guy I won't mention, but it probably works for them in the area they're in, but I think they worked with ex-students on HMOs, and all they've done is check their bank statements and move them straight in for speed. I tried this in the northeast, and we deal with a mix of working, like blue-collar working style tenants and social housing tenants, and we moved them in just checking their bank statements without no deposits and that, and no major references, and it didn't work for us. Not to say it don't work for other people, but it didn't for us. But I highly recommend doing thorough referencing. Use a good referencing agent. There's lots out there, but use a really good referencing agent. Next, you want to do a home visit of theirs. Do a home visit of theirs to make sure where they're living now matches what they're saying. And obviously when you turn up at their home, you get an idea of how they look after the property, and they might say they're moving out because the landlord didn't actually do a repair, so you'll get an idea whether or not that's correct. Another thing you want to look out for is fast movers. So if somebody's moving before the end of their tenancy, or they've only been in a place for 6 months and they're moving on, that's sometimes a warning signal. Sometimes there's genuine reasons behind it, but sometimes warning signals. And again, for me, I want long-term tenants. I think it makes sense for most people to have a long-term tenant instead of a high turnover, because it costs money to advertise, get the property ready for them. So yeah, long-term tenants is what you're after. Another thing you want to be looking out for is making sure you get them to commit with a deposit. As I said, that last company, somebody I trained with moved them in without taking deposits, and ultimately, yeah, that didn't work for us in that area. They just looked at the bank statements, took some advance rent and moved them in. So they didn't move them in with referencing or deposits, but for me, it didn't work. I think you need to get them to commit to something. We do a zero deposit scheme where they have to pay for this insurance, but it still gets them to commit some money out of their pocket. In certain areas, sometimes a little flexible, because we ask for deposit, upfront rent, make sure they pass a guarantee. Depending on how much demand that property's got will be depending on how flexible you are with your criteria, but there's one thing you don't want to budge on. You want them to have some skin in the game and some commitment with some form of deposit, even if it's them paying the insurance for the deposit scheme. And next, you want a really good inventory so you can manage expectations. Inventories are very, very important, ideally with a timestamp and a location stamp on there, and walk them through that inventory at the start so they know how they're getting the property. If there's little issues that they want repairing, let them know whether a landlord or if you are the landlord is going to repair them yourself. So you just manage the expectations from the start once you have found the right tenant. But I hope that is useful for you, and if it is, please give us a thumbs up and a share, or if you know anybody else you think will find it useful, please share it to them. Also, I have got a written form of this. I'm not sure if it's quite linked to the video yet, or it should be on my website soon if it's not on there now, but we've got a much more detailed version of this in a quick little download PDF if you want to have a look at that.